It's quite interesting because as I'm bringing you this message, I've just come back from a week of prayer on the mountains, and it's very important to me. I've actually been going to the mountains to pray for more than 30 years, and that is probably one of the most significant times in my ministry. I'm now picking up where I left off in my last message because I'm using the authorized version, and last time I was in chapter 9, which deals, of course, with Saul's conversion and how miraculous it is, and then when he met with the other disciples in Damascus, he himself, that's Paul, really faced persecution. And so in actual fact, Saul, he's eventually going to change his name to Paul, but just at the moment he's still Saul. He then went to Jerusalem, and actually they were afraid of him there, and Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles and explained about the conversion and the boldness of his preaching in Damascus. And then there was a time of peace, and they brought him down to Caesarea. And then the whole story changes here, and that's where I ended last time. The whole story changes here because in verse 32, it came to pass, it's Peter back again. And Peter passed through all quarters, all areas, and he then also came down to Lydda, which is where the saints were dwelling. And when he got there, and I find that this is very interesting, and I possibly spend quite a bit of time just dealing with this issue, because when Peter, and you have to remember who was actually writing the Acts of the Apostles, we believe it was Luke, and he doesn't refer to himself so much, he's referring to the others. And he says quite clearly, when Peter, having passed through various areas, came to Lydda, he found a certain man named Aeneas, which had been in bed for 8 years and sick of the palsy. So it's quite clear that it appears that he probably was one of the believers, because it infers that. But certainly when he met Aeneas, this man who's been critically ill and bedridden for 8 years, verse 34, Peter simply said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ makes you whole. Get up, make up your bed. And he immediately got out of bed. I find this is quite interesting, actually, because we get so used to the miracles of the New Testament. But here I find this is quite unusual, that this is apparently already a convert. I mean, the fact that he's been in bed for 8 years means that before the awakening of the message of the gospel and the preaching after the death and resurrection of Jesus, he was in bed before that happened, because he's been in bed for 8 years. So this is no new thing. But when Peter gets there, I mean, this is a group of disciples, a group of believers, but they had not made any apparent move to heal this man. And to me, that raises a number of questions. But Peter when he saw him, immediately realized that this was going to be a miracle. And simply, it doesn't say he anointed with him an oil. It doesn't say that he laid hands on him. He just simply spoke to him and said, Aeneas, Jesus Christ makes you whole. In other words, healed. And having spoken that, he then makes the challenge, because I can imagine after 8 years in bed, Aeneas was not realizing what was going to happen. And it's not as if there's any sense that Aeneas is appealing to Peter, but simply this is Peter's initiative. And I want you to realize this is Peter's initiative. And he says, calling him by name, Aeneas, Jesus Christ makes you whole. Get up. Get out of bed. And he obeyed and got out of bed immediately. This miracle didn't take days or weeks. It wasn't a matter that Peter's there and praying and then some few weeks later Aeneas gets out of bed. No, immediately. I like the word in the authorized version, immediately. Right now, he gets out of bed, healed. And the miracle was so big that verse 35 puts it in its context. All the people, and it doesn't say just believers here, and it's quite clear that these are unbelievers who are watching, because all that were living at Lydda and Sharon saw him, and because of the miracle, they turned to accept the Lord. I want you to see the importance of this, that the disciples were there, but it takes this powerful miracle to bring numbers. It says everybody. I don't know where else that you actually see that it virtually refers to everybody. All that were living at Lydda and Sharon saw him and turned to the Lord. So this miracle, Peter doesn't stay there. And it appears by verse 36 that he's gone to Joppa. And when he gets to Joppa again, there's a certain disciple, a lady called Tabitha, which in the other language is Dorcas, so depending which language you're using, Tabitha or Dorcas. This woman was full of good works, which she had done. And it lists them in verse 37. But it came to pass in those days that she was sick and died. But this woman is remarkable for what she's been doing. But now, in verse 37, she's not only sick, she died. Now, again, she's living with believers and known as a disciple, and she's sick and she dies. And they prepared her as they would do, but instead of burying her, for reasons which they don't explain, they laid her in like a bedroom. That's what I'm assuming, an upper chamber. It's a bedroom. And because Lydda was near Joppa and Peter was still at Lydda, the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, and they sent 2 men asking him that he would come quickly.